The honourable member for Medicine Hat, Cardston Warner.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I have it on good authority, Speaker, that the Prime Minister's favourite Christmas movie is The Grinch. In fact, it may actually be where the Prime Minister came up with the idea for his carbon tax. You see, just like the Grinch took the food off the plates of the Who's in Whoville, the Prime Minister is also a fan of taking food off the plates of Canadians. The Grinch took more of a hands-on approach, however, to ruining Christmas by personally going into their homes and stealing the food. Now, that may have seemed like too much real work for our ivory tower PM. He simply used the CRA to collect his carbon tax, but the effect is still the same. He has removed the presents out from under the Christmas trees of Canadians and left the pantries of these Canadian families empty. Now, here's a twist, Mr. Speaker. Even the Grinch, or Madam Speaker, even the Grinch came to realize that what he had done was wrong, and he remedied his ways. That's what we're doing here today. We're giving the Prime Minister and the NDP-Liberal coalition the opportunity to prove to Canadians before Christmas that their hearts are not two sizes too small, to remedy their ways, so to speak. You see, Mr. Speaker, we all know that the next election will be a carbon tax election. Given this Grinch of a Prime Minister, he even knows that most Canadians will no longer vote for him and are rejecting the inflationary carbon tax, which really does nothing for the environment. But maybe, just maybe, the Prime Minister, in the Christmas spirit and all, will allow Canadian farmers, First Nations and families to afford to eat and heat their homes this Christmas and provide some relief from his killing tax. Madam Speaker, maybe he doesn't understand. We know that he refuses to listen to common sense, but maybe one of his ministers would be able to relay this message. And here's the message. Get your pen ready. A tax on farmers is a tax on food, period. It's pretty simple. But look, it's worse than that. It's a tax on healthy, locally grown food. It's annoyingly costing the consumers more to buy food, but that generally seems to sum up the Liberal approach. The carbon tax on healthy food is actually where this tax even becomes more nonsensical, but also not unlike the Liberals. Take, for example, the produce grown at Big Marble Farms, a very large greenhouse. It's an operation just outside of the city of Medicine Hat. Madam Speaker, did you know that carbon dioxide is used to feed greenhouse horticultural crops? Big Marble and all greenhouses use CO2 generated from heating and operating their facilities to feed their crops. Just think about how nonsensical the carbon tax really is, when you consider that. The Liberals tax the very CO2 that enrich greenhouse crops, that utilize the CO2 to fully photosynthesize their potential. This environmentally friendly process of using the CO2 generated from greenhouse operations using natural gas helps grow their plants. And yet, the Liberals claim that for environmental reasons, they need to tax the carbon tax that produces fresh vegetables. And just to illustrate further, Madam Speaker, Big Marble Farms will pay over $500,000 in carbon taxes this year alone. $500,000 for feeding their crops, the produce that they actually grow in their greenhouses. Our agricultural producers across my riding will each spend tens of thousands of dollars annually on the carbon tax. Now, in order to remain in business of supplying Canadians with fresh produce, with grains, with meat, and with other food, in most cases, these costs are passed on to the consumer. Madam Speaker, it's a tax that disproportionately affects those in my riding trying to grow the food and those wanting to eat healthy and local food. Now, let's take that same greenhouse-grown produce and compare it to food that we see in our grocery stores from other countries that is not subject to a ridiculous tax. They grow it there, they ship it thousands of kilometers to Canada, and they sell it in our grocery stores cheaper. Why? Because they're not subject to the carbon tax on production or transportation. It makes absolutely no sense, Madam Speaker, none whatsoever. In fact, Canadians are actually reducing their expenditures on groceries by either reducing the quantity or the quality of food they are buying, or by substituting less expensive alternatives. Now, what does this lead to, Madam Speaker? For starters, projections for 2024 show at least a 2.5% to 4.5% increase in food. Notably, meat is suggested to rise another 5 to 7%. Vegetables will be up another 5 to 7%. Bakery items will be up another 5 to 7%. And why are the food prices rising? Rising production costs contributing to these price increases, all because of the carbon tax. It hurts Canadian farmers, it hurts Canadian families, and it hurts our First Nations. In fact, a new food price report shows that a family of four will now pay $700 more on their groceries in the coming year. And that is on top of the price increases we have already experienced in 2023 and 2022 and so forth. Madam Speaker, do you want to know why we should care at all about this? Well, let's start with the fact that we are experiencing the highest level of food bank use in Canadian history. In Medicine Hat, the Root Cellar Food and Wellness Hub is our food bank. They are currently feeding 4% of Medicine Hat and area, which has a population of well over 75,000 constituents. It's heartwarming. It is a heartwarming level of generosity by the Root Cellar team and the community that contributes. But it's an agonizing statistic when you let that soak in. The decisions that were made in this chamber by this NDP-Liberal coalition government have led to hungry families in my riding and across this great country. Madam Speaker, I hope that if there are any members in this House, or in the Senate for that matter, which lack the self-awareness required to vote against farmers, First Nations, and families, that those members be reminded by their own families, by their own neighbors, and by their own constituents while they celebrate this Christmas. Madam Speaker, at a time when Food Bank Canada's hunger count revealed that there were nearly 2 million visits to a food bank in a single month, a 78% increase over March of 2019. Unbelievable. With that many community members relying on the food banks to eat, these NDP-Liberal members must know that some of these visits were made by their own constituents, by their own neighbors. And Madam Speaker, they're going to have to face these people. And I don't know how they're going to do that and be able to justify their decisions in those moments that they meet them. I'm just thankful that the Conservative leader put forward a motion to help them. And I have the ability to speak to that motion today, thankfully, and will vote in favor of helping those in my community and across this country. Madam Speaker, how could the Liberal NDP coalition government and this Prime Minister ever vote against farmers, First Nations, and families from growing our food and heating their homes and eating? To try and understand how they could even consider voting this way, I might have to look back at Dr. Seuss's book, The Grinch, for the answer. And I quote, "No one quite knows the reason. It could be his head wasn't screwed on just right. It could be perhaps the shoes were too tight. But I think that most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small." Thank you, Madam Speaker.